Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambert, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. Today I have Katie Maynes on the podcast to talk to you about building a career in PR. Katie is a PR specialist, a visibility and storytelling coach with 20 years of experience working in a range of PR roles in Melbourne, London, and Queensland. She now has her own business, Katie Maynes PR, where she helps international charities with their PR, as well as providing spotlight-shy entrepreneurs with the tools and confidence to share their stories. Earlier this year, I met Katie when I completed her PR classroom course, and I can vouch for her extensive PR knowledge and her ability to inspire others to get their story out there. Welcome to the podcast, Katie. It's great to have you here.
Oh, thank you, Leah. It's so great to be here.
So, Katie, I've been really looking forward to having you on the podcast. But before I sort of interview you about your own career story, can you explain to those who may not know what exactly is public relations or PR?
Yeah, great question, and one that I'm asked all the time. So PR or public relations, it's actually funny because it has changed a lot since I graduated uni over 20 years ago, but the definition still stands. And that is the effective communication between an organisation and its public. So it's all of the storytelling and the way that you spread your messages to your public.
So, Katie, after school, you went straight to university at RMIT and studied a Bachelor of Arts with a public relations major. How did you first become interested in PR, or how did you even know about that course?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I didn't know what PR, I'd never ever heard of PR up until year 10. And I was at my school careers night, and I remember I just saw a woman was sitting there and she had PR or public relations written at the front of the desk. And I sat down and she started telling me about what she did, and I just loved the sound of it. My older sister did marketing, and she actually did marketing in RMIT as well. So I had an understanding of marketing in her course, and I thought that is sort of what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to copy her. And then I heard about PR. I thought, well, that's a little bit different. And that's not copying her. That's perfect. And I just loved the sound of it. It just sounded really interesting. And the lady that I was speaking to sort of I think she worked for an agency and she had all these different clients, and she was talking about sort of the day in the life and how she would be at a photo shoot and then she would be interviewing someone. And I just thought it sounded super interesting and would sort of fit my skill sets, I guess.
Okay, great. So then you went to RMIT and studied the course. What sort of content do you actually study in that course?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I really wanted to do that course, and it still exists today, except I think it's more part of the business school now, more than arts, which I think is a really great fit. It's probably very different now to what it was then, because I can still remember then we had a particular class which was about the internet. 101 about the internet and Google searches and things like that, which is just hilarious now you think about it. I can still remember one of my classmates going, oh, gee, there's this amazing search engine called Google. So, yeah, okay, that shows my age. But it was so very much, it didn't have a huge digital focus back then. Did have a writing focus, and writing is something that is a huge part of PR, and it's something I didn't actually realise when I went into it, which is crazy now that I think about it. PR works very closely with journalism, and our course, so that particular course, I'm not sure if this is still the situation with that one, but it was run concurrently with the journalism course and the media studies course at RMIT. So we did a lot of overlapping subjects with the journo students, and a lot of the journalism students went on to do PR and vice versa. So there was a huge crossover. So lots of writing, media studies, because media relations is a big component of PR, international studies, politics, although they were sort of, I think, more elective, so you could kind of choose what way you would go. And I guess that's something I love about PR, that it's so broad and across a range of different industries, but you really do have to be interested in the media and know what's going on. And just know sort of how all of that works, definitely around a current affair and politics. And then there were sort of risk management based classes as well, because that's another component of PR that you can do. Well, it often rears its head, even if you're not specialising in it, which is crisis comms. And so sort of helping obviously an organisation or a brand get out of hot water if they get into it. And if they're in the media for the wrong reasons, helping them to convey the right messages and get out of the situation that they're in. So there were classes around that. And then events was another part of it too, because events is a component of PR. Once again, I think that was more sort of elective based, but I've definitely always come across events in any role that I've had in PR. So that was really useful. Yeah, so I think that they were really the main ones. And then there were sort of very straight, generic sort of PR courses and PR campaigns and how actually to run different campaigns as well. But yeah, it was a very good course. It was, at the time, it was pretty tricky to get into, not because of the, is it an ATAR or an ENTAR these days?
ATAR.
Oh my gosh. Not because that was high, but because there was an entrance exam and also an interview, and they only took a certain amount of students. And I don't know if that's changed now as well. But that was kind of good because the exam was very much around a current affairs again, which I think is really important to have a grasp on if you're sort of going into this area. So that was sort of a range of, I've given you a big account of, what was involved. But it was a really good course. And in 3 years, I certainly learnt a lot. And was working, I must say, the final year, I was pretty much working in a full-time job and doing the course alongside it. So it gave you the scope to do that as well, which was good.
Fantastic. And what can you give, I guess, anyone who is thinking about doing the PR course at RMIT or another university, what are some examples of the types of entry-level roles that someone would go into after completing the course?
Yeah, so there are lots of jobs around, which are very much, so if you were to work for a PR agency, it would be sort of an PR executive role or coordinator role, so assisting PR managers. And those roles are very much, it's actually good. And I think it depends on where you work, but I think that any role that you go into, the great thing about PR is often you will get a lot of experience straight into it because you can't avoid it. You're exposed, I think, to a whole range of different things. Like I know for me, as I said, I was working for a PR agency in my third year of uni, and I was at that stage, I think, helping to sort of the PR manager to do media calls. So I was on the phone already doing media calls, and I think that is the great thing, that you do get experience early on. Those roles are, it could be a straight PR coordinator role. You could get an events role. It could be a fundraising events role for a charity or not-for-profit. Lots of councils and governments have comms-based roles as well that you can go into out of uni, which might be sort of more writing-based. So there's lots and lots of scope. And now, of course, the digital side, so digital media. And I think that you can't do a PR role now without the digital side, and that's going to become more and more apparent as we go on. So lots and lots of different opportunities.
So when you say digital media, what sort of software would someone need to be across if they were going to work in PR now?
Good question. Really just sort of the basic social platforms, so Instagram and Facebook. Like I know with my current clients now, I help them with some of those platforms. And then from an online component, like if you're working, well, not just for a charity, but, mail sort of EDM software systems like MailChimp and things like that, really useful. And then obviously it just depends on what role you're in. Like you might find that you might be in a role where if it was a social or digital media based role, that it's kind of visual based and they want you to have sort of photographic skills. So be able to take photos, and so obviously, be able to take sort of photos, manual camera, that sort of thing, and then be able to edit those. It all depends. And then the graphic design side as well, you may find that you have to sort of design things, but you might be able to do that in Canva and not have to sort of upskill. It just depends. But you probably find when you're going in that you'll learn all of those things on the job. I know that was really the best place for me in learning everything that I've learned. Obviously, I learned a lot of not so much I did learn practical, but, I did learn a lot at university, but it was on the job where a lot of those skills came into play. And I presume that's still the case.
So it seems to me that after completing uni, clients, students tend to go either to a PR agency or to an in-house role. Can you just explain to our listeners what the difference is between working for a PR agency as opposed to working within a corporate or in-house with a not-for-profit?
Yeah. So in an agency, PR agencies basically have a range of different clients. So you go in there and their main sort of function is to work with these different clients and specialize in PR. So they might have really big clients like BP and clients like that, and they're just using the agency for their PR function. So in an agency, you will get an amazing experience with working across probably a range of different industries and clients, and you'll learn how the media and how storytelling works in those different industries. And you'll also, you'll have some amazing mentors who will be working just in PR. So that is one big difference for agency. And then when you're working in-house, you'll find that depending on how large the organisation is, you will either be sitting within a PR team, but a lot of the time you might just be the PR person on your own within, say, a marketing team or within a fundraising team. So you're the one bringing the PR expertise to the table, and you may even be working with an agency to help you as well if you're in an in-house role, and you might be having to brief them in and everything else. So yeah, they're the major differences, and there's pros and cons to both. And I think that it's great to get experience across both, especially when you're starting out.
Are you able to share what a typical day might look like working in a PR agency?
Yeah, so it was a long time ago now. I guess I have an agency myself now, but it's funny, I don't really think of it like that. But yeah, when I worked in an agency, I'd laugh actually with my PR friends about it, like just how diverse your days can be. Like one minute you can be sitting there having a beautiful lunch, long lunch with a client, and the next, you're carrying massive boxes across town for a photo shoot. Like it's just so different and diverse. But I'll give you an example. I worked for an agency in London, which was really fun. And it was a consumer-based sort of agency. We had lots of food-based clients, which wasn't great for me at the time because they had Ben & Jerry's ice cream tub that sat right next to me and Stolich Night alcohol. And yeah, it was lots of fun for that time in my life. But the day would look like I would get in, and I was in a PR manager role. So I would get in, and first off, and this would be very different now. This was in 2004, 2005. But we would actually all sit down and go through all the newspapers together, which I loved doing. And obviously in London there was lots of newspapers, so it was quite a fun thing to do. And we'd go through and would, kind of, because it wasn't just working out if our clients were in the papers. And obviously there's news services and things that pick that up. And as I said, you would do it differently now. But it was about getting a real grasp for what the media were talking about at that time. What were the topics? So then we would almost have a brainstorming session while we were in there going, oh, how about we do this for this client? And I love that we did that. It was our founder who made sure that we made time for that every day. And I think that was such a great thing to do. And then we would go out, we would all have different accounts that we managed. So a lot of, there's a lot of meetings when you work for agency. There's a lot of meetings, I think, in PR across the board and comms, but in agency, there are a lot of meetings with both your clients and then your team. So often you would have a team within the agency working for a client. And so you would have like a PR manager, a PR executive, and then a PR director often. Depends on how large the client was, but that would often be the team. So you'd get together and you'd internally and work out what you were doing for the client. And then you would basically, if you're working on a particular campaign at that time, you would be sort of in the trenches working on it. So that would be writing media releases, doing media calls. That was sort of the main part of that role. Like now I think that role would have a huge digital focus. So you'd be sort of, on the social platforms as well, communicating and storytelling. So that was basically how it would look. But then from a PR manager perspective, usually the PR managers and directors, a lot of their role would be pitches. So looking for new clients and going out and having to do pitches, gosh, which I hated. It was like a job interview. And you'd have to go and basically present, and you would put together this pitch. So you'd put together some campaign ideas for the client, and then you'd have to get up and pitch and tell basically the client why you're a good fit. So yeah, there was a lot of that, and we did do a lot of that too. So, and then events. So then there'd be lots of events. There'd be lots of client relationship. Sort of would either be, back then we probably were having a lot of long lunches, where that doesn't really exist anymore. So yeah, so diverse and different. That gives you a big taste of what we would do in a day. But yeah, that's the thing I love about PR. It's never boring. It's always interesting. There's always different things to do. Yeah.
So from what you're telling me, it sounds, in an agency environment, very fast-paced, and it sounds like you do have to be putting yourself out there if you're calling journalists, doing pictures, going to events. Would you say that agency environment is a better fit perhaps for an extrovert than an introvert, or do you think it doesn't matter?
Oh, great question. Yes. So I'm an introvert. I'd say a people-loving introvert. But I found that hard sometimes, because I would often be, as I remember at uni, I was thinking, oh my gosh, there's just so many loud people, and I was often quite quiet. But when I say I'm an introvert, I do like speaking. I do like being on the phone. I don't mind doing presentations as much as, as much as they made me nervous. I did debating and things like that at school. Like I don't mind that sort of thing. So I don't think it matters if you're an introvert and an extrovert, and I think both bring different things to the table. Like I have worked with introvert colleagues who are just incredible writers and just like to put their head down and do the writing side and the strategy and planning side, and then have their extrovert colleagues do sort of more of the relationship building and client fronting kind of work. So I think there's a side. I think that I definitely don't think that you can pigeonhole yourself and say, well, I'm an introvert, I'm not going to be interested in that. And I think there are so many introverts who are creative, so want to do roles like this. And I think it would be a great shame if they didn't go into these roles because of that. So no, I think that you can be both. I do think that, maybe with agency, when it comes to pitching and relationship building and networking and things like that, then there is definitely a place for extroverts, and they do an amazing job at that. And also the energy levels with that. Like I know, looking back, I think, I was always, it was quite fast paced, and there was a lot of travel and things like that involved with events. So it was probably little wonder that I was tired, but I look back and think I was probably really tired because of all the networking and all of that, which I didn't always love. So yeah, I think that, there's definitely a place for extroverts for sure. But I think that, you can kind of find a role that suits you is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Okay, great. And I mean, it sounds like it was probably a great experience for you and great for your confidence and to learn to put yourself out there. But it's often for introverts, it's something they can learn to do really well, but it can be draining if you're doing it day in and day out and don't get that time to yourself and working perhaps at a steady pace.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, if you'd asked me in my 20s if I was an introvert or extrovert, I probably would have said extrovert, because I was trying so hard to be one to fit into the role, which I don't necessarily think is a great thing. But that you're right. It did make me put myself out there. It did give me confidence in certain things that I wouldn't probably have had the confidence, or given me the confidence to do things I wouldn't have had the confidence to do. So yeah, I don't think that's such a bad thing at all.
Now, after you worked in agency, you worked in-house for a number of very well-known brands, including, Village Roadshow. You started there earlier in your career. Then you worked for Australia Zoo, Yarra Trams, World Vision, and the St. Vincent's Institute of Medical Research. Can you talk us through some of these experiences and some of the key highlights in your PR career?
Yeah, so I always think the Village Roadshow job was quite surreal now I think about it. And it's so funny how I got that job. It was through the Yellow Pages. When I was at uni, we had to do an internship, and it wasn't a long internship. I think it was only 6 weeks or something, and it was over the winter break. And I I had been working, or at that time I was working for an agency, and I knew that they'd often spoken about a contact or someone that worked there who'd worked at Village Roadshow. So I just had in my head, oh gosh, I'd love to work there. So I just got out the white pages or the yellow pages, and I don't know, and like wrote letters.
You might have to explain to some people what the yellow pages actually are, Katie.
So like a directory of film distribution companies, and I must have called them and worked out who the contacts were and then wrote letters. And yeah, luckily, it was just lucky that someone, wrote back to me and said, yeah, you can come on board and be an intern. And it was really lucky because she lost her job while I was there, which isn't something to laugh about, but it was kind of, now I think about it, it was just so funny how it all happened. Anyway, so I went, even as an intern, it was just so surreal. Like, I think we're working on the film premiere of Swordfish, this really old film, and Hugh Jackman was in it, and he was out doing some of a junket for it, and had to like work on the premiere of it and stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing, at Crown. And yeah, so it was really, really funny. But it was also funny because I was driving this, 1980s Corolla, living with my mum and dad, driving in, and then, seeing how the others sort of lived. And yeah, it was just it was a great role. And there's no way I could do it now. Like, it was very fast paced, lots of travel, and really, really long hours. But it was fun, and it exposed me to a lot, and it, both personally and professionally, and it was a great place to start, I think. Yeah. So that was fun. And then I moved to London and worked for the agency. And then when I got back, I worked for another agency, but then, went to Australia Zoo. And that was really fun. It's actually funny, Australia Zoo, since I've started my business, I've been in touch with a lot of my old colleagues there, and a lot of them have gone into sort of entrepreneurial and business roles, which is really great. I think it was just because it was such a great platform for us to see, I guess, just be able to see that anything was possible and that you can do all of these amazing things. And I guess I was speaking to an old colleague about it recently, and she said we were quite young and in these big roles, and so we sort of learnt, I guess, quickly on the job of what we had to do. And so I ended up, I think I was the PR manager there, and I sort of had this team, and I was quite young, and I I really was learning my way. Like, looking back, I wasn't a very good leader. I was friends with a lot of the people that I was managing, which is never ideal when you're trying to also lead the team. And so there was lots to learn in that role, but that was good. But it was difficult because it was only a few months I started after Steve had died. And so there was so much media interest, and as well as that, all of the management at the zoo was Steve's family. So they were all grieving that year, and but the business had to keep running. So looking back, it was a really interesting time to be there. But it was fun, like you got to do these really interesting things and cuddle tiger cubs on your lunch break and things like that. So so that was really great. And then when I moved back to Melbourne, I went into a much more corporate role. So it was a massive change from wearing khaki every day to working for Yarra Trams in public transport. But that was another really great sort of experience. I learned so much in that role because that was sort of really exposed me to crisis management side as well. Also, lots of radio interviews, and I had an amazing mentor there, Colin Tyrus, who'd worked in radio for years and years. So he taught me a lot. So that was really interesting. And then after that, I decided that I wanted to go into a not-for-profit role.
I noticed it. I mean, you've worked really with not-for-profits ever since. So was that a conscious decision that you wanted to work for an organisation that was perhaps more aligned to your values? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, definitely. I often, as much as I love PR, I often wondered, I sort of had this feeling, I've got a bit of a nurturing kind of side, and I felt like was I doing enough? I always had these questions popping up. And so I sort of thought, well, the natural progression would be to look for charity and not-for-profit roles. I actually found it hard to get into charity and not-for-profit because the roles that I was going for, they would always ask, have you had not-for-profit experience? And at that stage, I had worked at Australia Zoo. They had a sort of a charity or a foundation called the Wildlife Warriors. So I had done a fair bit of work for that, but not specifically. I'd really worked for the zoo. So yeah, until I got the job at World Vision, I went for a few roles and I did find it hard. And looking back, I think charities are missing out if they sort of keep, I don't know if that's still the way it is, but I do think that you need to understand how a charity works. And now I've worked with a lot, and I think that, they work differently to the corporate world, but you bring so much experience and expertise in, regardless of where you've come from, and you can apply that to charities. So I don't know if that's changed, but I did find that hard. But yeah, it was definitely aligned with my values, and just felt I wanted to be doing a bit more, even though there was nothing wrong with the other jobs that I was doing. I just had sort of this feeling that that's what I wanted to do.
Well, look, it's interesting that you say that, because it is still difficult for people to make that jump. And often I think people feel that they can just move, I'll just move into NFP, but that problem will have you had experience comes up time and time again. So particularly if you're applying for jobs in that field, they like to see that you are committed to helping people and giving back. And so it's often advising people to perhaps do some volunteer work, and so that you've got that on your resume or on your LinkedIn, and so that they can see that, you are driven to give back to and contribute to society.
That's, such a great idea. And my sister actually did that. So she's followed my path. She's even more so now works in international affairs from marketing, but she, I think, worked sort of for Ford for years and years in marketing, and then wanted to go over to not-for-profit. So she, I think, did a fair bit of volunteer work, and that really helped her get across. So I agree. I think that is a good place or a good thing to do, and there are lots of opportunities to be able to do that.
I just wanted to go back. You mentioned before that there are some key differences between corporate and not-for-profit. Are you able to give just your perspective on what some of those differences might be? Not necessarily from a PR perspective, but just in general.
Yeah. So I would say, the corporate world is obviously much more profit focused, and then the not-for-profit charity world is fundraising focused. So the difference there are similarities with that, because you're really, I guess, you're looking at the consumer, you're focused on the consumer, or you're focused on the donor. Now, there's obviously a lot more involved than that, but from a communication perspective, that's a way that you could look at it. So what you're going to find is that there's a range of differences. So one is that you might find that the corporate environment, and this is quite generalised, but it might be more routine, not routine, but sort of systematic. There's lots of processes in place. You might also find that there might be more budget around. So you'll find potentially with not-for-profit and fundraising that's often something that can be a bit of a challenge, that the budgets are lower. So working in PR and comms, you need to be aware of that. You may not have a bigger budget, whereas if you work in corporate, like I know for me, when I worked in corporate, or when I worked for an agency and we had corporate-based clients, we'd have these lavish, massive events, and often the budget wasn't too much of an issue. Whereas all of a sudden then I was moving over to, say, World Vision, and I would look at the budget and be thinking, that's like the catering budget of this other event. How am I going to do that? And, it makes perfect sense, because you've got to be very aware of the bottom line. Every dollar that is spent in a charity is coming from donors. So it has to be well spent, and you need to be making sure you get return on investment in that. And the same can be said for corporate, but it is different. So the other thing that is a big difference, I would say, with charity and not-for-profit is that you will come across some really, really passionate people And that's not to say you won't come across that in corporate, but, you know, people who are working in fields that they have worked in all their lives and they would die for that thing. And working in PR and comms, I've worked with lots of charities. So I almost feel like I have to sort of become passionate about all these different things. And then I'm working with these people who are just so passionate. I don't know if that makes a whole lot of sense, but it just means that there can be challenges around that, because if someone is really, really focused and passionate on something, it is sometimes hard to get certain ideas across or, get your point across, because they might be so focused on that thing, whereas you mightn't get that so much in corporate. So that's another big difference that I see. And it just depends as well. I mean, because say working with a charity like World Vision, like that's huge. That almost has a whole range of different departments like a corporate organisation may. But then a lot of the charities I've worked with are quite small. So that's another big difference in that you won't have all the departments that you may in the corporate world. So you may find that if you're working in the corporate world, that you may work within a PR team and have some PR people to be able to have, you know, bounce ideas off and have you support you. But in a charity, you may be the only PR person, which means that, you probably want to have support outside of the organisation when it comes to PR if you're sort of having challenges around something and want someone to help you. So that's another thing too. So there are definitely differences, but it just really, there are lots of, you know, it does depend. It just does depend on what the organisation is and how large they are. And the other thing that can come up with charities and organisations is often they'll have corporate's the same, but they'll often have boards, and you sometimes have to get approval through boards and then approval through management. And that can also sometimes lead to a few challenges when it comes to getting things approved or ideas accepted. So, they would be the things that I've found. Yeah.
That's interesting. It sounds like you need quite good, strong influencing skills in that environment.
Yeah, you do. But I think that the reason why I really do love charities, and the reason why I've ended up predominantly working with them, is that for me, when it comes to PR and you're selling a story and you want to really believe in that story or believe in that product, and it's easy to do if you're working for a charity. And so I think that is actually one of the big reasons why I do work with charities. And as I get older, I do find it's harder to try and pitch something that you may not be convinced or excited about yourself. So that's, I think, a really great benefit of working for a charity, that you're working for an amazing thing. And the upside of the passion, I was sort of talking about passion, saying that it was a negative thing, but the amazing thing about that is the teams are often really great to work with, because you're all kind of coming together for the same thing. Like I've worked with the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre on their telethon. They've got their next one actually just about to happen, but I helped them with that for a few years, and it's just beautiful, like seeing everyone come together for that. And there's no one in that team who wouldn't want to be putting in 100%, because we all really want to see the results and see them get a whole lot of money in. So, I think that's a really great thing about charities and not-for-profit.
You raise a really interesting point, because, I mean, at the end of the day, from what you're telling me, PR, it's almost like sales, and you have to put yourself out there to get across what you are trying to pitch. And so I guess it's interesting, being an introvert as well, that, you know, often that sort of selling doesn't come as naturally to introverts. So I think, you know, that's even more reason why you need to be really passionate or really interested in what you're trying to get across.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right, Leah. Like that's exactly right. And I think that's how I felt. And it's probably the part of the role that I've struggled with the most over the years is the selling. And the roles I've been in, like say at Australia Zoo, there wasn't much selling with that. That was more media management, because media were coming to you. I probably preferred those roles than the ones where it was more trying to get the media. Although with charities, that's what it has been, but I haven't minded, because I've really supported the cause, and I've really had a huge motivation to make it happen. And the payoff of when you get coverage and is really beautiful and great. And so completely agree.
Now, Katie, I want to talk to you about your own business, Katie Maynes PR. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing? I know you're working with international charities, but can you also share how you help entrepreneurs who are a little bit spotlight shy?
Yeah, sure. So I started my business, I think it was about 4 years ago now, and I actually started it because I'd had my daughter and I was kind of looking for more flexibility. That was probably the big driver at the time. Um, and I didn't really know how it would look. And so, and it really has had sort of this model of two, as you said, I've got sort of two functions there. One as a coach, helping spotlight shy entrepreneurs, and the other consulting and helping really predominantly charities. I have helped a few entrepreneurs as well and businesses. So the consulting side has, yeah, as you said, working with charities, and that's really mainly media relations. So helping them with big campaigns, as I mentioned, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre and Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation, and just helping them get good coverage in the paper so they get brand awareness and people see what they're doing, and hopefully they get more donors as a result of that. That's really the main aim of that work. And it's something that, as I said, I enjoy because I see the huge payoff in that. And I also love telling the stories. Like, there's some really beautiful stories that come out of that. And yeah, that's something that really I love and is a key driver for me. And then the other side of it, the coaching side, came about because I was seeing a lot of people who had really amazing stories to tell but just didn't want to stand up and tell them. And so it was sort of always seemed to be those people who were not just loud, but they don't have to be loud, but, confident and were able to tell their stories. They were getting all the airtime. And those people who, were a bit reluctant to weren't. So that sort of was a driver behind that. And I do coaching around that. And I've been helping a lot of clients to start their own podcasts or launch their own books and write their books and then launch them. And even just storytelling now, because with online business, as you know, Leah, like a lot of it is about communicating, even Instagram stories and Facebook Lives and things like that, which terrifies a lot of us. So, I really enjoy that side because I feel like it's something that a lot of people struggle with, myself included.
Yeah, and for anyone starting their own business, often, unless you've got a marketing background yourself, it's completely new. Like it's been a very steep learning curve for me, having to do my own social media and write blog posts and copy for the website. And it's quite fun because you learn lots of new skills, but it's all new.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. Yeah, it is. It is. It's a new skill, and it does take a lot of energy too, doesn't it? Because it's sort of so. I think the more you do it, the easier it becomes. But yeah, you kind of almost need to make it a practice within the business or a priority to see it happen.
That's right. And so how can people find you, Katie, if they're looking for some help getting their story out there?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, which is katiemaynes.com.au. And as Leah said at the start, she was part of my course, which was amazing, the PR classroom. There's some really great students in there who are learning, how to do PR, so how to get their stories out into the media, what makes a good story, and just, how to tap into maybe some opportunities that are already there. So you can sign up to be on the waitlist for that on my website. And you can also find me online or on social media, Instagram, Katie Maynes, and Facebook's the same. And I also have a podcast, which is called Business Between Vowels, which is for parents building businesses between school drop-off and pick-up, which we're finally doing again, which is a great thing. So you can find me there. I haven't been all that active, I must say, on Instagram of late, so I'll have to get back into that myself.
Well, we've had all these little people around us who shouldn't be at home, haven't we? So
We have. It's funny because I've actually been doing a fair bit of Instagram for one of my clients, and I thought, it's so much easier when you're doing it for someone else. You just pop things up and it's fine. But it's been a good reminder to me that when you're posting things or you're showing up and doing stories, that there is this, well, obviously this personal aspect, and a lot can go into that.
It's definitely putting yourself out there. And I find the writing and the audio is great, but the video for me is still a bit of a hurdle that I'm yet to overcome. So that's a work in progress.
No, I'm the same. Video is my least favourite too. But yeah, I think practice makes perfect.
That's what they tell me. So look, Katie, thank you so much. I've learnt so much from chatting to you today, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. So thanks again. Best of luck for your business for the rest of the year, and I'll look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, Leah. It was great to chat and a bit of a trip down memory lane as well, talking about PR. So thank you.
No, thanks, Katie. Bye. Have a great day.
Bye. Oh, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.